Welcome to another episode highlight brought to you by the You Can't Comp This NBA Trading Card Podcast. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to support the show, simply hit that subscribe button, click that bell for notifications, and you'll be notified every time we go live. See you in the comments.
It's totally fine. But if people do jump in, we'll answer all their questions. In the meantime, we're going to talk about an article that was put online and it was written by Chris Golick.
Yes.
That's the best way to really talk about it, isn't it?
Yep. I was tagged in this a couple of times, funnily enough.
I'm not surprised. As much as you love regulation, this young man is speaking your language, I do believe. It was also brought to my attention by Mac_card collection. So we've spoke about him a few times already online. So really good follow on Instagram. Look, I think I'm just going to turn this over to you, Ad. You know, we'd strongly suggest everyone go out and read the article. The article is entitled, "Is Regulation Needed in Sports Cards?" And what were your main takeaways from it, Ad?
Look, I went through the article briefly. It's no secret that I am a fan of regulation within this lovely hobby that we have. And I think the more that there's sort of financial stakes and such that we need to regulate certain aspects of the hobby. I think we've seen as a whole in the past, people get burnt in a big way. And I've seen the hobby be exploited a lot. And my thought is, and I'm sure it's shared obviously in this article as well, that we are open to exploitation and there is a need for some kind of regulatory controls to protect people.
Yeah, sure.
So that's my initial summary, my initial 2 cents. I think the amount of parallels that are drawn between sports cards and we use it as it's not a literal connection, but a parallel between trading stocks and trading cards.
Yeah.
Now, on the stock market, and as I was joking before with regards to winning the Box of Revolution, insider trading, that's not on in the stock market. For very good reasons, it's regulated.
Well, they try to reduce
they try to. I understand that. Yeah. But it's not like an open market where people can just push narratives to drive prices. And I think we're open to a lot of exploitation in our hobby.
So I think we should just really quickly say good afternoon to James and also to Al. Hope you're well, guys. And Al's first comment is that open to exploitation is an understatement. So, and I think that's what this article is really getting to. So I think you've really tapped into that really well. Just to quickly summarize, the analogy he was trying to make was a comparison between if you're gambling at Nevada and opening sports cards boxes, you know, what are the different controls in place? So the analogy he was putting down was that if you're playing a poker machine, you win a jackpot, but then the casino says, well, no, we're not going to pay it out. There's actually a high body that you can escalate that to. They'll come down and give you that. And so that there isn't that same overseeing, regulating body with basketball cards. It's Panini is self-regulate. So if there is a problem with the product that you receive, you have to then appeal to Panini to hopefully they'll make you whole. And look, they do have a reasonable system where you can send in evidence of not getting what you should have gotten out of a box, or, you know, whatever way you want to say that. But at the same time, what you do get back from them is often, you know, very minor or very small. And and maybe the big one that now it's sort of coming to my head now is the redemption process, where the redemptions expire after a set period of time. And then also too, there's no guarantee that they'll be filled. And so this is the big one for me in terms of, like, you know, regulating something. Either they're giving out points or they're giving you out an alternative, you know, source of replacement card. And often that isn't what keeps people happy. You know, there has been some really good instances where actually people have gone overs on it, but there's also those terrible instances of, you know, when people go under.
Yeah.
The next thing that he talks about in there is that, can you compare it to gambling, which I think is a whole other conversation altogether. And I feel like we could do an entire podcast on it on itself. But you know, is that something that when we're talking about regulation and we're talking about making sure this is a safe space for everybody. How do you change that definition of gambling to luck, I suppose, or with something else? What's your thoughts around that, Ad?
Yeah, there's I think it's a very fine line, and I've always sort of alluded to the fact that it is a type of gambling. When you're going into a Raz to it depends what you're buying, but you're buying into the chance of winning a major prize, right?
Yeah.
And realistically, it's a fine line between gambling as in at a casino versus a raffle. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are forms of you're putting in for something of monetary value. So you're paying money and you're expecting something of monetary value in return.
Yeah.
Sure, you're not getting money in return.
And I think that's probably why at the end of the day it's not considered gambling. Because you're not getting those instant returns, you're not getting the cash back.
Yeah.
And in the article, he speaks about people getting life-changing money. So the big one that happened in the last 24 hours is that Filth Bomb Breaks have allegedly pulled the 1-of-1 Steph Curry gold vinyl rookie card.
Okay.
So, if we're talking about, life-changing money on that,
yeah.
like that could be a $5 million card at one point. I think that's the type of card where, that could go for insane money. Okay, maybe 5 million is a bit of a crazy number, but let's say 3 million AUD, which is what, 1.8 or, a bit more than that in USD at the moment. So that's not a crazy thing to say. At one point, that card will get to that.
But even when you get into the tens of thousands of dollars, that's serious.
Yeah,
money.
sure. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Let's keep it like that. I just thought that was a good example.
That
was
something I agree completely.
That popped up recently. Yeah,
but these aren't. I'm spending $2 on a packet of cards, and I might get a $50 card.
Yeah,
these are things. These are pieces of cardboard that have a supply-demand factor to them. Let's be clear on that.
Yeah,
where if the demand for that particular player is high enough that we're talking tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that Panini would like to regulate the way they deal with their own product, but I think the overarching side of this hobby is that we're not talking about $50 cards. We're talking about a secondary market here where there are tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even millions of dollars being exchanged.
Yeah, sure.
Like, you go back to the Golden Auctions show on Netflix when they're talking about how many billions of dollars go into trading cards.
They're focusing on the really big.
You're talking about this kind of turnover, and you're also saying there's no regulatory body to actually, because this is it. What was and I'll use Golden as the example. All the photo matching. And then we go back to our lovely friends. Was it one?
He's one of one.
But it is. It's our social media regulatory body with card porn. Do you remember that? Like, let's build trust. And then we authenticate things that are not real. And that's millions of dollars of fraud. Like, if that doesn't demonstrate a need for a regulatory control on this hobby, then... And I'm not saying regulate every single Facebook marketplace or, do you know, like where the little collectives of people are running $10, $20 sales on their cards.
Yeah.
But I think there's got to be some level of control when it comes to a significant, not a substantial amount, a certain significance in the value of a piece of cardboard.
Yeah. So let's just dip back into the comments a little bit here. So we got Sean Alloway from Liftoff Cards. How are you, mate? And the long wait when dealing with them. So that's in regards to the redemptions that we're talking about before. And then Al's back in the comments again. So it is indeed gambling, despite Russ hating me for saying it all the time. The link between gaming loot boxes and problem gambling has been robustly verified, according to a report carried out by researchers at the universities of Plymouth and Wolverhampton. And card boxes are no different. So, look, I do agree with that, but probably like where I'd push back a little bit here is that I think if we overly regulate the hobby, I think it'll take a little bit of the fun out of it.
I agree.
I think the other part of it too is anytime you implement regulation and controls, that also costs money, which was, going to be coming from our pockets. So how they pay for this, that's something else I'd be interested to, hear about. But also too, it's like, So maybe we use loot boxes as a good example of that. So there was a pretty decent pushback on that recently because, a lot of money was being spent on the loot boxes in games, and then people didn't even know what the probabilities were, coming out of it. So I'll use the one that's the most in my mind because I'm playing a fair bit of FIFA at the moment. So when you click on the packs, it actually tells you now what the percentages are. So you're hoping to hit this card if you buy this particular pack. It's a less than 1% chance of buying it.
Yeah.
So then you kind of like, well, actually, I don't really want to take a 1% chance to buy this thing up. I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to try and get the card in a different way. So I think if you then apply that back to trading cards and even Pokemon, I think we mentioned this at the same time now too, because it's the whole thing. Like, we don't want to overly regulate this thing that is kind of like pretty fun for us all to enjoy. At least know what your odds are of, getting that particular card, whether you do think it's worth opening that box or just going onto the secondary market and actually just buying the card that you want. I think that's the big one for me. I think so. But, and we're going to be seeing.
Yeah.
After you go.
Yeah. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head with it with a certain point. Transparency is the big one. We're not trying to regulate the hobby into out of existence, I guess is probably my term. But what we're trying to do is have that level of safety and security that what we're entering into, we're fully educated and aware of what we're buying into. If I buy, and we'll say a loot box, a repack, whatever it is, if I don't know what the odds are... Well, you can choose
whether to be educated or not, right?
Yeah, but if the option isn't there to tell me what I'm buying into...
Yeah,
I think that's unfair because you don't know if the repack run is 100 packs or 2,000 packs.
Yeah, sure.
Now that changes whether or not I want to purchase that product.
Which is the perfect segue for us to talk about our sponsor, right?
Yeah, exactly. We leverage this quite well. But yeah, like understanding what you're purchasing, having the information. We don't have to force everybody to read the terms and conditions. However, we should have that information if we want it. Like it should be there and available. And I think it's deceptive if they don't have offer that information.
Yeah.
And I think something as simple as that, the transparency, takes that loot box, a gambling aspect away. I do think there's different levels of regulation required in different zones as well. Like there's loot boxes, there's sealed product, and then there's a secondary market. And I think there's different types of regulation needed in all of them. But some oversight in some capacity.
Yeah, I think I'd probably prefer oversight or some level of control as opposed to like a true regulating body. I just think if we do regulate it, I think that'll slow things down and might make the hobby a little bit cramped. And, there are some fun things about having a relatively unregulated hobby too, if that makes sense. Like there's maybe a bit more opportunity for...
I suppose if there's regulation, there's the opportunity. There's a level of safety and protects you from exploitation. I.e., like if you regulate, there are consequences for. Like imagine if it was actually against the law to provide a counterfeit card, and there are fraud.
Yeah, I mean there is. Okay, actually, I've thought of the perfect example. Actually, what I would say. So, for example, I wouldn't want regulation per se, but I would like control. So for example, there can't be just one company making all the cards, because I feel like some of the bad stuff that Panini did was because they had no competition. They just do whatever the hell they wanted to. If it was Panini and Fanatics going head to head, I think that would be a really good control, because it'd be like they would have to, relatively keep their print runs under control. They would have to really be competitive with their product, with their quality control too. Do you know what I mean? I think that would be something that would be really good. But, that's up to the NBA to put that out there. So Surly Sports Cards, I hope you're well, mate. Thank you so much for jumping in. The language on the boxes has become pretty laughable. No hard facts, just you may hit or it can contain. 100%. Yeah, that sucks.
Like patches and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, if you want to get 3 hits out of a box, there should be 3 hits in the box. That's exactly what it should be. Yeah.
What happened to the good old days of 1 in 36 packs? Basically 1 per box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adam, I'll let you have the final say onto this. And then listeners who are currently in the chat, we're going to go to a quick break after Adam's final thought. Put some conversation pieces or a topic for us to talk about in the comments. And when we get back, we will talk about it.
Yeah, I think overall, I think some kind of regulatory body, and I don't know if I'm gonna segue and end up opening a can of worms here, but we've talked about Panini being the only regulatory body. I'm gonna give you 3 letters right now to actually consider about how this is becoming a monopoly. PSA. If the only body that is the controlling authority on grading is PSA, is that going to be a problem down the track? Because we are giving them all of the power at the moment.
No, I think at the moment, actually, grading's a good example of how you have open competition, and then you've got the different companies doing different niches and then pushing each other forward.
I feel like PSA is still the PSA. It has got too much control. Is probably my
Yeah,
thought
sure.
on that at the moment, and that's the
Because
way
they're
they're
so
headed.
dominant, definitely.
Correct.
Hey, do you know what would be so funny if the regulating body was Panini and they had to come in and like audit Fanatics?
Oh my god, that would be the best, wouldn't it? No. Upper Deck, no, don't let Upper Deck do it, Jesus.
All right, let's go. Let's go to our first break.
Here is the way that you can get in touch with Russell and myself and be a bigger part of the show. Now, if you follow the link tree to our Facebook group, that is where Russell and I put our mailbags up, our card versus card, our player versus player, our buy, hold, sell questions. All of those will go up on socials, on IG as well, using the handle @YouCan'tCompThis. Now, if you do have a more tailored question, feel free to PM us on Instagram. You can reach out in our Facebook group, and we'll be happy to respond and see if it's something that we can add to the show. Once again, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate the support and love creating this content for our loyal listeners. If you haven't done so already, we'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and click the bell for notifications. So hopefully we see you when we go live. Thanks for watching.